as you can see here, Mr. Chairman, the provinces have a negative insofar as performing their functions are concerned, while cities have a positive and towns have a negative. In other words, next slide. In other words, the internal revenue allotment given to local government units is insufficient to cover the actual devolved functions given to them, and it's also insufficient to cover inflation, the increase in population, and salary adjustments as mandated by Congress. So many of the local government units, because of their fiscal standing, cannot actually give the benefits of the salary standardization law up to 100% because of the fiscal standing of the respective local government units. Next slide. So it is respectfully recommended by the task force, Mr. Chairman, that the necessary amendment to the Constitution be made to ensure that customs duties and other national taxes are included in the just share to be computed and to be given to local government units as internal revenue allotment. We also propose this in order to address the vertical imbalance through greater tax decentralization and to increase the tax base. Next slide.
Before that, Yusek, the Mandanas ruling, does it rule that customs duties will have to be added to the computation, or income taxes like EVAT collected by Bureau of Customs? I'd like to be clarified on that. What does the Mandanas ruling state? Because here you're saying that even the all collections of the Customs Bureau will have to be part of the, is that correct? Will be part of the pie that will be divided 60-40, 60 national, 40 for the local government. So may we know the Mandanas ruling, whether is that the ruling that all, including customs duties and taxes collected, which are really income tax because they collect also for on behalf of the BIR. So what is the Mandanas ruling? And before that, I'd like to also welcome the presence of Deputy Speaker Henry Waminal. Enlighten us on the Mandanas ruling and your proposal.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The Mandanas ruling states that tariffs and customs duties collected by the Bureau of Customs, 50% of the VAT collected from the BARM, 30% of national taxes from the BARM, 60% of all taxes and charges from exploitation and development of the national wealth, 35% of the excise taxes from locally Virginia-type cigarettes and other tobacco products, and 50% of the VAT on sales of goods or services, and 5% of the 25% franchise taxes are now to be part of the tax base or of the pie that is to be used for computing the just share of or the era of LGUs, Mr. Chairman.
So it includes practically all the collections of customs plus the others stated there.
Yes, Mr.
So
Chairman.
if you can give us an idea, for the past year, for example, how much was collected by the Bureau of Internal Revenue, which is the only basis for the 60-40? And how much was collected by the Bureau of Customs on tariff on customs? Because you can see now the magnitude of what will be given to the local government units.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think I have that data right here. If you can just give us time to go through it before the end of the hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so please proceed.
We'll give you that data.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on, we propose, Mr. Chairman, for more justice also to the poorer provinces, that we also make changes to the distribution of the internal revenue allotment. We respect, Mr. Chairman, the current system right now of land area and population, but we respectfully recommend to the committee, Mr. Chairman, to also consider, for example, poverty incidence in the local governments, meaning the higher the poverty incidence, there should be an additional criteria or era so that the LGUs can provide for better social services and public spending to address poverty, for example. And Mr. Chairman, we also propose that we also consider the geographical areas in need, geographical peculiarities of the provinces in need. For example, island provinces, Mr. Chairman, which are technically isolated, they are in need of more development, and maybe we can add as another criteria in the distribution of the era geographic peculiarities of the local government units or these particular provinces. And there are also two other proposals, Mr. Chairman, to encourage the local government units to utilize own source revenue. We should also look at the level of possible local tax collection in the area. For example, if the local government unit has not yet up to now revised its market schedule of real property taxes, that should also be considered in the computation of the ERA, meaning we would want them to first fully utilize their local revenue before they resort to increased ERA. Because sometimes it is because of their shortcomings that they are not able to collect. And this breeds over dependence on the internal revenue allotment.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senior Vice Chairman Albano.
Mr. Chair, when we and Yusek Jonathan Malaya and some of us like the Honorable Vincent Omar Reville, the former Vice Governor, went to the University of Freeport to study actually federalism, I think this is an offshoot proposal of the what you call the helping scheme, because there are federal states in, when we studied the composition of the federal states of Switzerland and even Germany and so other countries that are federalized, that the rich federal states subsidizes some of the poorer states in order for them to be, to have some equity and equalization. The mere fact that this proposal is there, I am one and amenable to this, Mr. Chair, because of the history of how ERA was shared in the Philippines, where Metro Manila, basically, or NCR and most of the big cities allocated all of our major projects, like the development of their ports, their airports, their roads, their bridges, their networks, their MRTs, and so on, to develop the cities, which is okay. But now that we are going into a decentralized type of government, and that is the proposal for the constitutional change that we are referring, I think it is really important that we do study and propose the equalization or the just compensation of getting more from the rich states that will be created, or the rich regions that will be created in our constitutional reforms to help those that are poorer. And I think that is the offshoot, if I think where you are proposing, Yusek Jonathan Malaya.
Well noted, Senior Vice Chair. So please proceed, Yusek Malaya.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that's the end, Mr. Chairman, of this first proposal. Essentially, Mr. Chairman, what we would like to emphasize to the committee is that while we support the Mandanas ruling and we would like to enshrine it in the Constitution, we also feel this is an opportunity to really make it a just share, meaning those provinces and cities who already have a lot in terms of local tax revenue from real property tax and business taxes should have diminished ERA in favor of provinces and municipalities in far-flung areas who are more in need of government resources should have additional in terms of the ERA. We feel, Mr. Chairman, this is an opportunity for Congress and for government to correct this sort of injustice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, yes, this is
Deputy Speaker.
with regards to the proposal to give additional internal revenue allotment funds for those with higher poverty incidence. But this is easier said than done. What would be the quantification of these additional funds? How do you compute, based on the power incidence, the additional funds? And more than that, what if, let's say, at the moment, a province or municipality has high poverty incidence, but after a few years, they have lowered it to reasonable levels? Would it mean that you would still continue to receive the additional internal revenue allotment? I think that is one question that the proponent should answer. Pag bumaba na yung poverty incidence, tatanggap pa rin ba sila ng additional funds?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To address the concern of Deputy Speaker, if the poverty incidence has gone down, then the ERA should also go down based on the poverty incidence. And the poverty incidence can be based on the statistics coming from the PSA. There is a annual poverty incidence study done by the PSA, and that could be the basis.
I think, Mr. Chair, the ERA would remain the same because it will be based on land and population. What we are talking about is your proposal regarding the additional funds vis-a-vis the poverty incidence. So hindi mo pwedeng babaan yung ERA nung dahil bumaba yung poverty incidence, but your proposal regarding the additional funds. Yun ang pinag-uusapan natin dito, yung additional funds. Now, with regard to the geographical factors, I do not understand why we have to include this. What if, let's say, an island province like Guimaras or Biliran, what if they have a very low poverty incidence? Do we still give them additional funds? I don't see any reason why they should be given additional funds just because they are an island. If their poverty incidence is low and they are developed provinces, why should we give them additional funds?
Yusek Malaya.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Essentially, Mr. Chairman, of course, the land area and the population is whenever the population increases, that becomes part of the formula as well. So it's also the same with poverty. If the poverty increases or the poverty decreases, then the ERA can be computed differently. What is only fixed, of course, is the land area because population and poverty incidence are moving elements of the formula. Now, with regards to the island provinces, Mr. Chairman, we took a look at the provinces that have developmental challenges, and many of these provinces are the isolated areas in the Philippines, those found with mountainous regions and island regions. But I would submit, Mr. Chairman, that we need more study with respect to this proposal. So we will take a look again, Mr. Chairman, insofar as this is concerned, and submit our recommendations to the committee.
Congressman Zarate, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I just be clarified, Mr. Chair? Yusek Malaya is saying that they want this Mandanas ruling be placed, enshrined in their proposed amendments to the Constitution because they want basically to increase this there will be an equitable distribution of the ERA. So just a clarification, what do you want to you want to amend the Constitution and basically place the substance of the Mandanas ruling in the Constitution? Because if that is the case, as we are discussing now, talagang pwede namang magbago-bago pa uli, no? Ilagay mo yan sa Constitution ngayon. Ano bang gusto natin ilagay? Yung formula? Kasi kung ang problema ay formula, dahil nakalagay doon sa ating local government code, tagibang yung share ng local, then I don't see a need na kailangang i-amend pa ang Constitution for this. Because we can amend the local government code and reflect the substance or the essence of the Mandanas ruling. And because we cannot anticipate what will happen in the future, no? Pag nag-improve na yung buhay ng mamamayan, then the easiest way is again amend the existing or the amended local government code. No? Sa halip na ang palitan natin ay ang konstitusyon. So yun ang gusto kong i-clarify, Mr. Chair. Why the resort immediately to amend our constitution instead of just amending yung existing local government code.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I explained during the first part of the presentation, the position of the task force is that we would want more permanence insofar as this provision is concerned. There was some ambiguity in the text of the Constitution, which led to the different interpretations of various government agencies since 1991. So we would like more permanence. Number two, we will also want to safeguard the hard-earned gains of the LGUs because they fought for this just share in the Constitution. And if we just do legislative amendment, no, it's subject to change, and even jurisprudence may change over time. So by putting it in the Constitution, it gives it more permanence. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I would agree with Congressman Zarate that the local government code may be amended later insofar as the formula is concerned. However, since that proposal has been pending in the Committee on Local Government for so many Congresses at di naman po gumalaw, ang feeling po namin, ito na yung opportunity na pinag-uusapan na ng Committee on Constitutional Amendments na isulong na rin po namin dito. But of course, I respect the opinion of Congressman Zarate that this can also form part of a legislative amendment in the Committee of Local Government.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Deputy Speaker Maminal.
just a follow-through with that of Deputy Speaker Jani and that of Congressman Zarate. I subscribe with the views of Professor Malaya that degree of permanence because jurisprudence can be changed from time to time depending upon the will and the wisdom of the sitting justices of the Supreme Court. And in so many instances, just like that ruling of the labor cases of the Philippine Airlines and even that LGRO's hearing of that component cities. So placing this in the Constitution would ensure its sustainability even in the next generations that will come. Now, I would like to ask, what is the recent effectivity of the Mandanas ruling? Is it retroactive or effective? What year is the effectivity?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doon po talaga sa desisyon walang nakalagay na period. So, ang pakiusap po sana ng mga LGUs ay ngayon na. At gusto nga nila na magkautang pa, na gusto nila na maibigay na ngayon na. But the position of government right now is that we are not prepared to give the Mandanas ruling amount at this point. So government is preparing, the DILG, the DOF, the NEDA, we're preparing for its full implementation in 2022.
May we hear the position of DOF? Because when you say 2022, it should be based, because under the law, the ERA sharing is based on the income 3 years prior to that particular implementation. So if, when you speak 2022, may I hear a clarification that it should be based on the income of 2019? Or what is the clear-cut policy of the DOF in relation to this Mandanas ruling, insofar as effectivity is concerned?
We will comply with the Mr. Chair, Deputy Speaker, and we will comply with the ruling of the Supreme Court. It's been subject of a clarificatory ruling, and the clarificatory ruling is such that it will be effective. It will be prospective in application, and it will be 3 years from the date of the decision. The decision came out 2019, so. The DBM, I don't know if somebody from DBM is here. I'm sure the DBM can explain further, Your Honor. But we will implement on 2022, Your Honor. We are, in fact, the DBM is preparing for that already.
When you say 2022, based on the income of 2019.
Yes, yes, Your Honor. No, it's based on income preceding 2019, di ba? Preceding 2019, Your Honor. It's not 2022. So 2019 backwards, that will be your base, and that will be the base for the ERA. Can I defer to the
Yeah.
DBM? They're the ones
Yes,
implementing it.
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
just
We will
one-
come what will be the,
Before that, I would like to ask.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes.
Yusek Agabin, just a point of clarification. You said earlier, the implementation of the Mandanas ruling will be prospective in nature and not retroactive.
Yes, Your Honor. It will be
Okay.
prospective.
Thank you.
Yes, can we now hear the DBM on this explanation on the implementation of the Mandanas ruling?
probably, Mr. Chair, before the DBM will respond to that, we just would like to have a specific prospective, what year? Because when you say 22, it is based on 2019 income. That's what we would like to know.
Yes, we have Attorney Condes, Dustin J. Condes, Director 3, Department of Budget Management. We are recognized, Director Condes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to confirm the prospective application of the Mandanas ruling. In fact, through the resolution of the Supreme Court, October 8, 2019, it also discussed that the 2019, 2020, and 2021 as being requested by the other local government officials for the application of the immediate application of the Mandanas ruling. It has been ruled by the Supreme Court in effect that the 2019 to 2021 budget can no longer include the decision, the changes brought about by the decision of the Supreme Court on on the year 2018. So, sir, regarding the applicability of the Mandanas ruling, it has been clarified that it will be applied on 2022 and the basis will be the income that were collected 3 years from 2022, which is 2019.
Is that clear in the ruling? Because decision of Supreme Court should be really be prospective and immediately executory. So it should be 2019 based on 2016. Yeah, that's, would like to know how, is that a direct statement of the Supreme Court that it should be 3 years after 2018, meaning 2022? Do we have that?
That's why, Mr. Chair, that is the direction of my question, the clarity of that meaning of prospective. Because the decision 19, it's prospective. It should be effective
2019.
the year after, or
Yes,
2019.
by
or
the 2016
2020.
ang recording. So is that the ruling of the Supreme Court? Because when we win, okay, when there is a decision, it is immediately executory, and then if it's 2018, so sa 19 isama na 2016 ang basis. Again, from the Attorney Condes, how come you're saying the Supreme Court said? Is that, can you read the decision of the Supreme Court that reads that it should be 2022? You know, Yusek Agabin is the son of our beloved Dean and my professor in UP. And Dean Agabin will always say that this will be prospective. It should be executory 2019. So can we hear again? Can we have the decision? Because just very short on that, and then we continue. So that, because we would like to be clear, because decision Supreme Court should be implemented. You have that specific statement of the Supreme Court?
May this honorable chair allow me to go over the decision. I just have
later,
the exact copy,
Yeah,
sir.
if you can get
And
a copy
I'll
and
get
explain
back
to us
on-
your basis for making it 2022 and not 2019, the year after it was promulgated, 2018, okay?
Yes,
Just present that ruling, okay?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yes,
Mr. Chair, in fact, this is one of the reasons why we're pushing for constitutional change, and as we've mentioned a while ago, it is really important that this be made, Because since 1991, if I'm not mistaken, they have been computing the wrong computation and have been shortchanging all the LGUs, including my province of Isabela, or our provinces. And this is really precisely the importance of amending the Constitution, since constitutions are supposed to be lively, or what you call dynamic, and can be changed through the process in time if need be during times like this. And so I subscribe, Mr. Chair, that we really need to create, include this position of the delegation here for constitutional amendments, Mr. Chair.
Just a final question on this one. You have not stated there anymore land area and population. What happens to this criteria? So you propose, this is now the proposed amendment.
No, Mr. Chairman.
So how do we also, do we discard already population and area, or this will be in addition to those two requirements?
Mr. Chairman, we of course made adjustments here. I think we should just add this as additional criteria, but we should also retain land area and population, Mr. Chairman.
It already says there, just share as determined by law on the basis, only on the basis
Yes, Mr.
of
Chairman.
financial needs, organizational capacities, and resources.
Yes,
So,
we will make a revised submission to the
yeah,
committee,
we should
Mr.
have
Chairman.
also land, and in addition to that, so land area, population, and also this.
Yes, Mr.
So
Chairman.
that it will be clear. Otherwise, you are really setting aside, with this constitutional provision, land area and population. So can you make a revised, yes, or revision on that, so that it's clear already the 5 criteria that will be included, including the equal, the proportionate sharing, something.
We
Okay.
will comply, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, yes, so that it will become, clearer and more precise to be able to rule the next generation. Okay. This-
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, I'm not yet through with my second follow-through question.
you can proceed, Deputy Speaker.
So after that clarification on the Mandanas ruling, which the DBM still have to study according to him. On the issue of additional criteria on poverty incidents, Deputy Speaker Johnny was asking a clarification that this poverty incident should be in addition to the minimum requirement. So otherwise, this particular province whose poverty incidence is high, so makuha niya yung what is due as an LGU, may dagdag siya because of poverty incidence. So that kung bababa yung poverty incidence na niya, ibig sabihin successful na tayo, yung additional mawawala, pero yung minimum share niya on the basis of land area and population will still be there. Okay, so that's a good clarification. And that is also the same with geographical area?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We agree, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much.
Kindly proceed, because we have to hear the other members of the committee, so that they have been invited, and we give them a chance to also explain and clarify. Yes, please proceed.
Yes. My second presentation, Mr. Chairman, is about the proposal of the task force to transform the Regional Development Council into the Regional Development Authority. Next slide. For background, Mr. Chairman, the Regional Development Council is the primary institution that coordinates and sets the direction of all economic and social development efforts in the region. It also serves as a forum where local efforts can be related and integrated with national development priorities. Next slide. The RDC, Mr. Chairman, as provided in EO 308, series of 1997, is composed of local government units, national government agencies, the private sector, and non-governmental organizations. Next slide. These are the functions, Mr. Chairman, of the RDC. Essentially, Mr. Chairman, the RDC was created in answer to the need for a single regional planning body whose main concern is the overall socio-economic development of the region. Nung inaral namin, Mr. Chairman, itong RDC, lumalabas na panahon pa pala ni President Marcos ito. This was created by virtue of Letter of Implementation number 22, issued in 1972 by President Marcos pursuant to the Integrated Reorganization Plan of 1972. And then the 1987 Constitution enshrined it in Article 10, Section 14. Next slide. Next slide. So we have some problems and issues related to the RDC. What are those problems, Mr. Chairman? Number one, the regional development councils are simply recommendatory bodies to the national government. In effect, national government agencies can simply set aside their recommendations if these are not aligned with the priorities of the national government. And the centralized hierarchy of approval, in effect, marginalizes the development concerns of the regions. Next slide. It is established, Mr. Chairman, that few regional plans are approved because it is dependent on the approval of the NEDA board. And even if approved, it is subject to the discretion of Congress and line agency. Let me just clarify, Mr. Chairman, I don't think Congress is at fault here. It is subject to the approval of the agency itself. And it's the agency that proposes this to DBM, and it is DBM that prepares the National Expenditure Program. So in effect, Mr. Chairman, even if the project is included, the RDC does not know if it's going to be approved or not, and the RDC has no say as to its implementation. Next slide. For this year, Mr. Chairman, fiscal year 2020, only 25% of the projects endorsed by the RDCs were included in the National Expenditure Program. This is a very small percentage of the government's budget, Mr. Chairman. And if you look at the next slide, Mr. Chairman, which is the different agencies, the implementing agency, the proposed budget as endorsed by the RDC, and the budget provided in the 2020 National Expenditure Program, you will see that it is really, on the average, just 25%.
May I interject? 25%, so what do you think is the ideal, supposedly? 50%, 75%?
That's a
The
very good
proposal.
question, Mr. Chairman. However, we would want it to be higher from the existing 25% because we would, it's our position that the local, the people on the ground are also are also in a position to determine what are the projects that are beneficial to them. And many of the projects which are proposed by the RDC are not acted upon by the line agencies. In fact, many of the members of the RDC, in particular those who are local government officials, do not attend the RDC meetings anymore because many of the programs and the plans which they approved on the RDC level are not acted upon by the line agencies.
And because of that, can Congress legislate this matter, mandating that in the NEP, 50 or 70 or whatever percent no, na projects, kailangan galing siya sa proposal ng RDC. At mas i-empower ang RDC along this line, mandating that all these, ilan nga lang umattend doon sa RDC pag nagpapatawag. So i-mandate na talagang umattend yung mga line agencies, representatives of line agencies, including members of Congress. No? Kasi membre naman ng Congress yung ang mga House of Reps members are also members of the RDC. Can we do that here?
Theoretically, Mr. Chairman, it's possible, but you will need to amend so many laws. In particular, the law that requires that government budget is proposed by the national government through the president who prepares the National Expenditure Program.
Administrative code, we have to
Yes.
amend that.
Also the administrative code from the various proposals coming from the RDC. So madami pong tatamaan, Mr. Chairman. And the RDC is a constitutional provision. So we feel that it would also be important if we also fix if the RDC system, as provided in the Constitution, to ensure that socioeconomic plans of the regional government are given funding, not necessarily dependent on budgets given by the line agencies.
But theoretically, Congress can do that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it can, but it will need to amend a lot of laws to be able to make this happen, compared to amending the Constitution, the RDC. Because if we amend the RDC, then everything else will follow.
Before this, may I just recognize some of our guests that came. Undersecretary of the Presidential Legislative Liaison Officer, my good friend, Gerald Salapantan.
Morning.
Good morning. And also with us here is the Department of Justice Assistant Secretary, Attorney George Orta.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you
Good
for
morning,
gracing our
everyone.
occasion. Please proceed, Yusek Jonathan Malaya, with your proposal.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So essentially, Mr. Chairman, next slide. The proposal is to amend the Section 14, Article 10 of the Constitution with relation to RDCs and make the RDC more functional by transforming it into a regional development authority, into a functional body vested with both formulation, implementation, and monitoring powers with regards to plans and programs aimed to develop the region. In effect, Mr. Chairman, is magkakaroon na siya ng pondo din, akin to the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority, which is the RDC of Metro Manila. But the MMDA is provided with funds by Congress, and therefore the MMDA implements projects that are beneficial to the Metro Manila region. We would want the same also in the region, so that the socio-economic plans, the regional development plans which are crafted by the regional development councils ay hindi lang po matulog, ngunit talagang mabigyan ng buhay at hindi na dependent sa approval ng mga line agencies. Mr. Chairman, this, in our opinion, addresses a policy gap under our centralized unitary system, because this, in effect, is a sort of empowerment of the regions and empowerment of the local government units who comprise the Regional Development Council. Next slide. The amendment, next slide. The amendment will also allow the RDA to do the following: implementation of the development plans in accordance to the interest of the region, ensure that the funding for these programs and projects are implemented, and it will serve as a bridge to harmonize national government priorities with that of regional and local government programs and projects. Let me just clarify, Mr. Chairman, that we are not proposing a political unit in the Regional Development Authority. In fact, we will maintain the existing composition of the RDC when it becomes an RDA. We will also maintain the powers of the RDA, but just add to the authority of RDA and give them authority to implement projects and give them funding, so that their projects are no longer subject to discretion by higher authorities.
Yusek Jonathan Malaya.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Question to that.
May I just briefly say something, and then I will recognize first Representative Omenal, and then afterwards Representative Deputy Speaker Johnny Pimentel. But your statement is actually a problematic thing, because in the last meeting that we had here, it seems that you are adding another political layer, and it is having problems, especially that if we can see, as you've compared it to the Metro Manila Development Authority, MMDA, he's having problems executing all these projects within the cities itself, and they are crying foul over the intrusion of the MMDA. In fact, the reason why President Marcos, if I remember correctly, who signed this into an administrative order creating the RDCs, is that this is really for really consultative measures and to make sure that all projects will be aligned together within the provinces and the cities that are involved. So we are of this, of course, notion that you are actually adding another political layer by infusing recommended funds and even a chairman that has more powers than what the RDC has. With that, I don't want to, I would like to give Deputy Speaker Ominal the chance to enlighten us with his queries, and after that, Deputy Speaker Pimentel, and of course, Representative Gaite.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It is true currently the RDC is consultative. So when you will transform it into authority, so parang may powers na siya to regulate and to govern. Now, so we would like to hear the wisdom on that. On the other hand, in that purpose of ensuring the funding and implementation of the programs, my clarification to that is, how will this RDA now ensure the funding when it is Congress that determines and approves the funding? Even the current practice, there are projects which are approved by the RDC. Yet, when it comes here in the NIP, or when it will be deliberated by Congress, it's Congress that finally approves. No? Parang yung ginawa ng RDC, hindi nga nakakarating sa DBM, so hindi nga nakasama sa NIP. Ayun yung observation ko. No? Kasi just like Chairman Rufus, we're active in our respective advisory council of the RDC sa Region 10. So those are my two observations which we need clarification on this matter.
I'd like to acknowledge our colleague, former colleague here, Congressman Paras, and now Undersecretary of PLO, Jing Paras. You are welcome here with us. PLO Undersecretary. So we have the answer from our USEC, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to address the concerns raised by Deputy Speaker, first, Mr. Chairman, the word authority does not vest anything to the RDA. We can change it if you want. We can just call it a regional development agency. No? The proposal, Mr. Chairman, is simply that the RDCs is a good institution, pero sayang po talaga. Yun po talaga lumalabas sa napakaraming pag-aaral. Sayang yung RDC na nandyan. Nandyan siya, 1971 pa, ngunit hindi naman natin pinapalakas. So ang proposal po sana namin is strengthen it by giving it implementation authority. So, Mr. Chairman, there is no regulation here sa mga LGUs. There is no governance here. There will be no new government officials to be elected. The same composition as the RDC at present. The same composition, just different, but given funding and given authority to implement projects. So, how is this, Mr. Chairman, implemented in practice? The RDC may decide to implement a project through the provincial government. The RDC or RDA itself does not need to implement it. It does not have to have its own infrastructure arm. It may delegate this to the provincial government, or it may tell the DPWH, implement this project in the region without need for approval from the national government, since the DPWH and the provincial governments themselves are members of the RDA.
Mr. Chair, I think I have...
Yeah, Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Chair, I would
Before
like...
you proceed, we have not yet acknowledged Professor Soreta, Alfredo Soreta, the source person of the Interagency Task Force. Thank you for your presence. Please proceed,
I would
Deputy
like
Speaker.
to raise 2 points. First is with regards to the presentation earlier by Yusek Mayalaya. The line of reasoning why they are proposing to change the council into an authority. Yusek Malaya stated in the presentation that the proposals of the Regional Development Council resulted actually in lower percentage of that has been approved. And that is correct because it is normal. Usually, the RDC submits proposal only, but it is approved upon the availability of funds. I'm trying to give you an example. Take, for example, the DPWH. I think last year we had 570 billion pesos ang pondo ng DPWH. But I'm sure that the RDCs in the entire country submitted most probably 1 trillion pesos. So therefore, the percentage of those proposals that were approved is very low because it will be subject to the funds available that has been set by the Department of Budget of Management. Hindi kasi ibig sabihin na lahat na ipopropose ng RDC will be approved by the national government. Kasi tinitignan nila yung anong ceiling. So let's say one region submitted 20 billion pesos. However, the funds that would been allotted for that region is only 3 billion pesos. So normally, the government will approve only 3 billion pesos, which will result in the lower percentage of approved budgets vis-a-vis the proposed budget of the RDC. It has been my experience, I have been a governor, lahat ng proposal ng RDC, hindi talaga na-approve lahat dahil subject sa funding na siniset ng ceiling ng DBM for each agency. Now, that is one point that I would like to raise because that reasoning is misleading. Now, the second point, we would like, the proposal is the conversion of council into an authority. Now, one main glaring point that I would like to emphasize is that the authority will now have the power to implement projects. I think that is already the usurpation of the mandate of the different agencies. We know very well that the National Irrigation Administration is in charge of irrigation projects. We know very well that the Department of Public Works and Highways is in charge of infrastructure, roads, and bridges. Do you mean to tell me, Yusek Malaya, that there will be another layer of bureaucratic red tape? Meaning, there will now be a duplication. Sino mag-i-implement ngayon? Maguguluhan tayo, will it be the authority or will it be the implementing agencies? Under our government structure, the DBM provides funds, and these funds are allocated to different agencies, DSWD for social services, health for health services, DPWH for road and inaallocate sa different agencies, and who implements the programs? It is the different government line agencies. Now, if you put this Regional Development Authority, the power to implement, it will now complicate the implementation of the different projects. Magkakagulo yan. Kasi sasabihin ng ay powerful na ngayon ang chairman ng Regional Development Authority. Hindi, kami mag-i-implement niyan. Now, another point, you did not take into consideration the political aspect of the Regional Development Authority. We know how Philippine politics work. What if, let's say, kasi ang congressman is only advisory, advisors only sa RDC on RDA. We are not members. The members are the governors, mayors. What if, let's say, I am a representative of this district. I have several projects I want to be endorsed by the Regional Development Authority. Unfortunately, yung chairman, kalaban ko sa politika. We know how politics works. Kalaban ko ito sa politika, baka maging governor din to. Di-disapprove ko ngayon lahat ng proposal niya. So, I think we should study this thoroughly because we are given too much power to make it into authority. Ang dami na nating layers. That is another bureaucratic red tape, and there will be a duplication of functions, and it will create chaos in the implementation of different projects, Mr. Chair.
Any comment?
Appointed by the President.
Yeah, Secretary, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just emphasize, Mr. Chairman, that again, as I mentioned a while ago, maybe the word authority is the one that's causing conflict. No, we can change the word authority to agency or any other word that we would want, because as I mentioned a while ago, the existing powers of RDC are also the powers of the RDA, except that it has the power to implement. Now, to
That
clarify.
is exactly, Mr. Chair, my question. That provision, the power to implement. Ano mangyayari sa ibang agencies? Wala na silang because you now have the power to implement. And as I've said, this will create conflicts. We have regional directors, tapos papakilaman ng regional head ng authority. Whatever name you call it, but if the power to implement is still there, the effect would still be the same, Yusek.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, but let me just clarify that the RDA itself will not implement the project. It is the RDA will act through the member agencies, and the member agencies, for example, is DPWH. So it will still be DPWH who will implement the infrastructure project. It will still be DepEd who will construct the school building. It will still be the National Irrigation Authority who will do the irrigation project upon the authority of the Regional Development Agency. Now, it is correct, Mr. Chairman, that based on the experience of the Deputy Speaker, there is a ceiling by the national government in terms of funding. And of course, it's true that because of that ceiling, not all RDC projects are approved. However, there's also another factor that we have to consider in terms of priority. If the RDC proposed project is not within the priority of the national government agency, is not within the radar of the national government agency, because the national agency has a centralized view. The national government has an imperial Manila view. The national government agency is biased towards this certain region or the national capital region. Paano naman po yung mga proposals galing sa probinsya? That is what we're talking about, no? If it's not in the priority, it will not be given attention by the national government. Therefore, it is our proposal that a certain portion of the funds should be given to the RDA so that the RDA can implement projects that is the priority of that region, which is not necessarily the priority of the national government. And implementation will not be done by the RDA itself, but will be done by the member agencies that are part of the RDA.
Mr. Chair, that complicates things more because your proposal is the government will put funds to the RDA and will this be allocated to the different agencies. That is already the function of the Department of Budget and Management. So what would happen? This will be the scenario. The DBM at the moment releases funds to the different implementing agencies. But what you're proposing, to my understanding, and I hope that this is also their views, the DBM will allocate funds to the RDA, and then the RDA will be the one to allocate funds. Because you mentioned that the RDA will have the authority to receive funds and give it to the different agencies for implementation. Eh, naglagay lang tayo ng isang layer ng bureaucratic red tape dyan. Why? What is wrong with the DBM directly allocating the funds? And that is exactly what I say. Now, what if ang politika sumali dyan? Eh, may pondo para sa Surigao del Sur. Eh, yung head ng chairman, eh, kalaban ko yung Congressman Surigao del Sur. Huwag natin aprobahan to. And that will happen. You know how politics works. Mon Casiple knows this. Oh, alam natin, ganun ang nangyayari. Oh, eh, will we allow that? Di ba?
So we have sufficiently discussed that. So after all, we are just hearing the interagency. We have the comments of the congressman, and we'll decide which to adopt or which not to adopt. So is there any other presentation? We proceed to the other.
Mr. Chair, before we proceed,
Yes, Congressman Zarate.
I share the sentiments of Deputy Speaker. Talaga nag-create lang tayo ng... Kasi kung wala namang bago, no? Sabi niya, wala namang bago rito. Kahit palitan yung authority to agency. But very clearly, may dinagdag kayong bago. And you're creating a political entity. No? So, kahit sabihin nyo, the same composition, and ang gusto lang nito, budget, tapos implementation, but as what Yusek Malaya is now explaining, more than that talaga pala ang gusto. No? So, it will, I agree, it will even complicate things rather than empowering the regions. Mas lalong magkakagulo sa regions pag ganun yung gusto nating gawin in this RDA proposal, Mr. Chair.
Any other comment? Then we proceed now to the next proposal.
With a follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senior Vice Chairman.
I also am not amenable to the fact that in the composition of creating the RDA, that the President will appoint the chairman of the RDA, because as we know, politics can also transcend up to the national level, where if we've seen in the past that if you are not a party with the President, he can appoint another RDA chairperson as against all those politicals that did not support him in the last election. And so this is really quite problematic, to say the least. I think the proposal is good, but I think to amend the whole RDC concept is creating another political layer. And may I suggest that maybe just the proposal is to just empower a little more the RDCs into convening them, into creating them into a more, I guess, aggregate and conclusive body.
Thank you, Senior Vice Chair. Yes. Can you kindly proceed now, Yusek?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly to answer the concerns raised by Congressman Zarate and Idol Tony Pet, Congressman Tony Pet Albano. Mr. Chairman, when we were in Switzerland, we were always discussing about regional empowerment. And the problem with the Philippines is that we really do not have regional empowerment because we do not have regional level governance. What is called in political science as subnational institutions. We don't have that. What we have is the RDC. And the regional offices of the various national government units are extensions of the central government. The DPWH is an extension of the central government. Everybody else is an extension of the central government. And there is no entity on the regional level which fights for regional empowerment except the RDC, which is why we want to transform the RDC into the RDA. But I agree with the concerns raised by the various members of Congress. But let me just emphasize, Mr. Chairman, that we are not creating a new political entity. Kung bago po itong political entity, meron na pong election ito. We will elect a regional governor, we will elect a regional assembly or regional. Wala po. This is just strengthening the only regional body that we have right now. It's the RDC and the RPOC, Regional Peace and wala na pong iba. So napapag-iwanan po talaga ang regional empowerment and regional planning, which we feel is a policy gap in our governance system. And I hope Congress will seriously consider our proposal, because let me just emphasize that we are not proposing a new political entity. With that, we proceed to the political and electoral reform proposals of the task force, and I'd like to may I ask, Mr. Chairman, if we can give the floor to Professor Mon Casiple to discuss the political reforms that the task force is proposing.
Thank you, and we recognize Professor Mon Casiple.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we have the slides. I'm not really sure. But the proposals, I would like to list them first so that we can discuss it in a more systematic manner. Basically, Mr. Chair, the main proposal is for the institutionalization of the political party system in the Constitution. Then there are the aspects. First of all, as a public institution, a democratic public institution. The second is about campaign finance reforms. The third is about party switching, balimbing question. The fourth, Mr. Chair, is about the anti-dynasty provision or the fleshing out of the constitutional provision on political dynasties. Then there are additional proposals. First of all, is the tandem election of the president and vice president. And incidental to the discussion is the question of term of office, the replacement of the three-year, three terms system with a 5-year, 2 terms system. So I would like to discuss in those outline, Mr. Chair. The first one is basically a continuation of the discussion on political party reforms, which started in 2002. If you recall, on that year, there was the first and the only national conference of all political parties, in which the number one resolution was for the passage of a party development law, which can govern the political parties in the Philippines. This is now 2020, so that's 18 years. And the experience with regards to the bill is that there is still support from all the major parties. They know very well the reasons why we need that, and that is to have a set of rules for electoral contests and to address specific problems in our political system. Unfortunately, that bill was never passed up to the present. Our Constitution stipulates that there should be a free and open party system, but there was no fleshing out. In fact, that bill was supposed to flesh it out. Again, Mr. Chair, the placement of the provisions on the free and open political party system was placed under the section on Commission on Elections, meaning it's a bit below what we think is the priority position. It should have been in the Declaration of Principles, just like the anti-political dynasty provision. But then the main problem is that the political party system was never fleshed out. And we came to a point, or to a conclusion, those of us who have been advocating it for the past, basically since 1986, when there was the discussions on the 87 Constitution, that it may not pass a regular legislative process, or there would be too many political intrusions into the bill. That has been the experience. Every time or every Congress, that bill was submitted. In fact, I'd like to inform Mr. Chair that the House of Representatives has already passed it in the 15th Congress on third reading. And similarly, in the Senate, that bill became a committee report signed by 18 senators. But time ran out. And the 16th Congress and the subsequent Congresses, that bill was not really seriously discussed. So the proposal here is to put it in the Constitution itself. Of course, not the details, but the principles and the basic features of that particular political reform, which we think is very important, not only for our people who would like, of course, to have a fully functioning democracy, but also even for our political leaders who would be the one to contest the elections. Because the main problem that this particular political reform provisions addresses are basically the rules of the game. How we conduct our democracy, how we should have a level playing field, how we enhance the participation of our people in our democratic system. And the proposed sections are proposed to be added to the article on suffrage, putting it in a important position as part of the functioning of our political democracy. So, to start off, Mr. Chair, the section after, there are two sections in that article. Section 3 would basically address the question of institutionalizing the political party system or the political parties as democratic public institution. Democratic in that both internal, the processes of a political party should be democratic, meaning selection of candidates should have a party convention, there should be campaigns also within the party, there should be chapters composed of ordinary citizens who will take part in the party processes. Then it should be a public institution. In most, I think in all, I cannot recall an exception, advanced democracies, political parties are considered public institution in that their own democracy, the strength of their own democracy, rests on having strong political parties. Because these are the institutions whereby ordinary people can participate both in the selection of the leaders and also in governance. Their parties are very much alive, not only during election time, but in between election. It's a vital part of governance in these countries. In our country, it is already evident that political parties exist secondarily to the political candidates or political leaders. In fact, the political parties are not really a key part in the governance process, meaning they don't have, as a party, positions on various issues. Usually, legislators have their own position. Members of the political parties changes political parties both before and after elections. And that, of course, weakens the whole political party system. Then you have a question of long-term governance planning, policy planning. To cite an example, we are already faced with so many disasters because of climate change. But climate change as a phenomenon cannot be addressed in one Congress session or one period of governance, even by the President, who is the longest serving public official, 6 years. Many of the projects in relation to climate change would take several decades. The problem here, of course, is that even if you have a public official or Congress or President that has a definitive policy on addressing various aspects of climate change, but if there is a change in public officials, that can readily change. The policy can readily change. In advanced democracies, the institution that ensures continuity for long-term planning, long-term policy, are the political parties, both as the ruling party and also in relating with other parties and having consensus and so on and so forth. So the question of public institution means that political parties will have to be put under the top or near the top of priorities of the state itself, meaning the state will have a responsibility in making sure that the political party system works. The second aspect of that, Mr. Chair, is how the political parties ensure that democracy requires transparency, accountability, and as I've said before, internal democratic processes. And by becoming public institutions, the state will have that responsibility ensuring that transparency, accountability, and democracy. How will it do this? The proposal, of course, is that the criteria for accrediting political parties should be more stringent than what is already in the Constitution. Aside from Constitution, platform programs, list of official, the additional requirements would be chapters and a list of members. And then, as part of the Constitution of a party, the three principles should be within those constitutions and actually practiced. So you need a supervisory body.
Yes, Professor Mon, you have already given us some background on why we should. Can we proceed now to just the presentation of the proposed amendments so that the others can also be recognized?
Well, you
Yeah.
can,
So,
I don't have to read the whole
yes.
thing, you can read that. I'll just point out the key parts.
Yes, so right
Mr.
now,
Chair.
we are now on this slide. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Yes,